Hey, hi, hello. Welcome to episode 91 of Trail Society, produced by Free Trail. I'm Corrine Malcolm,
I'm Hillary Allen.
And I'm Keely Henninger.
and we all said our names in the right order. I'm so proud of us. I guess before we dive into the show today, there are a lot of bugs going around, the flu, norovirus. I was just listening to a podcast actually about cruise ships and norovirus. How did everyone's holidays go? Keely, it sounds like you might have rung in the new year completely horizontally. So, how are you feeling over there?
Yep. Royally getting my butt kicked. That's kind of how I've been putting it. And I feel like it's just not fair because I wanted to have a little bit of break before school. But I've just been sick since the 23rd. So, really trying to kick it, but it's just lingering. I didn't get norovirus, luckily. I had that like 2 months ago. And then again after when I was on La Palma, I had it then too. So I've already sh gotten my share of that one, but this one we think was just like a gnarly flu and then potentially like a bacteria that kind of took hold of my immune compromised state and got in my lungs, and it's just been lingering as like some serious bronchitis-y thing ever since. And yeah, I can't seem to kick it. So my thought for the training for the 2 weeks was like, cool, I'll get a nice like training block in. I'm so stoked. Feel like I've been running really well and really liking it. And then like the day after I get back from the East Coast, I was like, and I am really sick and that's not gonna happen. So this is a great training block. I think I'm at like 7 miles for the week. And I don't even know if I'll run today. So yeah, it's one of those. It's okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, but honestly, like I know that you're frustrated, but your attitude about it is good and a good reminder for folks that like you can't force it. Like you can't force your body. When you're sick, you're sick.
Hmm.
Even
Hillary,
if we even if we want to. I know, I felt that way too.
I was gonna
I didn't I wasn't sick for the holidays, but I was maybe yeah, like after right after Thanksgiving.
mm-hmm.
And so yeah, it's not I don't even know what I had, some combination of something.
Yeah.
all the bugs.
I know a lot of my
Yeah.
athletes are sick too, and it has me thinking about like Pavlov's hierarchy of needs and how it's really interesting how somehow running has become one of those like base tier needs. Like I'll have athletes be like, "Well, I haven't eaten anything in a week and I can't keep anything down, but I'm gonna go for a run." And I'm like, "No, what are you doing?" And so I've just been trying to at least be true to that. Like, hey, I can't cough if I'm running faster than a 10-minute mile without walk breaks. That probably just means I shouldn't run because clearly, like, it's not productive. And so I've just been trying to be true to that because, yeah, it's really frustrating. But at the same time, guys, like, your health is way more important than like getting in some runs over the holidays. And so just trying to remind yourself that like if you can't have basic function, running shouldn't be like higher than, eating food or not like hot hacking up a lung. It should just be like, hey, we'll do that when we're working at full form because right now the training is going to be pretty crummy anyways.
Yeah, I could not agree more. Speaking of training, we don't have much for race news right now. Transgran Canaria is around the corner, as well as Black Canyon and a little race down in New Zealand called Tarawera. Hillary, how's your training going for Tarawera?
Um, I'm like crossing my fingers because we've actually had quite a dry, well, in the town of Boulder, we've had like quite a dry December, and which I'm kind of enjoying. Although like people are skiing. There's like tons of snow up in the mountains. Just like leave it up there and just like let me finish out a couple more weeks here. But no, that's been good. It's been fun to honestly, I've been having a lot of fun with it just because it's been so different than the last training block that I had for UTMB. Um, so I've just been having so much fun. I don't know how the race will go. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm curious. Super excited to go to a place I've never been to before. I hear just like the culture, the history, the running community is just out of this world. So I'm really excited to go
Yeah,
down there and
a
to
flatter,
race.
faster 100 mile. That'll be really cool.
Woohoo!
The
Yeah,
miler. I love that they
I
call it
know.
milers in New Zealand and
Hmm.
Australia. They call 100 mile races milers.
Which is
You're
pretty
doing a
cool.
miler, and I love it so
I
much.
know. I put on like a post. I was like, "Oh, I'm doing the miler," and someone's like, "Is that a typo?" And I'm like, "Nope."
Nope.
That'll
That's
be
just
so
some,
fun.
yeah. It's gonna be awesome. And we're really excited as well for your race, but also and to like hear what you learn about yourself and kind of doing a very different style race from what you've been training for. recently, so we're amped about that. And the other thing that I think we're really amped about is that Black Canyon and Tarawera rather are the next two golden ticket races for Western
Hmm.
states. The hype is real. We are following along. Black Canyon is a super qualifier this year, which means there'll be three ticket for men, three tickets for women. Tarawera, the 100K, will have two tickets for men, two tickets for women. So we've got another five men and women getting their spots into Western states from those two races in February. So, um, trust me, fans of the pod, we will be talking about what's going on down there as it happens. But that's our only racing news for right now because everyone's taken a little reset before we really dive into 2025, which feels crazy.
Hmm. I'm stoked that Tarawire has maintained a golden ticket status.
Well, they didn't have it last year, which is like people
Hmm.
forget. People
Right.
I've heard in people's recaps this year talking about like Tarawera as they talk about golden tickets. I was like, wait. It was actually a weird year
Yeah,
in which
it wasn't.
Tarawera didn't have a ticket last
Hmm.
year. So it's back again this year. And I think that that is important because it does bring in some different athletes to the
Uh-huh.
race. Some people will be traveling there from the US and Europe, et cetera, to try to get a golden ticket. But um, it oftentimes does bring in, you know, someone from New Zealand or Australia, someone from the Asia Pacific region, and I think that's really, really cool.
Hmm.
So fingers crossed it all goes well for everyone.
Yeah, so exciting.
Yeah. Okay. So we do need to talk about some cool news and then maybe a small science rant slash TED talk from our very own Keely Henninger. But I pulled some stuff from some of our favorite women's kind of sports media houses together, The Gist, etc. And together put together this really cool kind of year by numbers. There's an article that just like is has it divided by sport and then some Olympic and Paralympic information. And again, together made the Everyone Watches Women's Sports shirts that have gone completely viral in the past 6 months. So I would check them out if you are unfamiliar with them. They're doing really, really cool work. So some of the numbers that I pulled that I thought were super interesting were just like, again, highlighting how well women's sports are doing, like kind of the change in the fandom and the broadcasting, et cetera. So they put this together. 12.7 million people watched the Olympic women's team gymnastics finals, and that's more than the first round of the NFL draft. And that's also more than every single NBA finals game in 2023. 14 million viewers tuned in to the or the NWSL, the National Women's Soccer League matches throughout the regular season. And that's the highest viewership in league history and approximately a 285% growth in viewership over 2023.
Oh.
Yeah, it's really cool. There were 54 million unique viewers for the WNBA season, and they had the biggest crowds in-house in the 2020 in the 22-year history of the WNBA. Um, I don't know if you guys remember a big influencer fighting an old retired boxer man on Netflix, but before that fight happened,
Yep.
there was a women's match, and 74 million people tuned in to see Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano fight. And that globally, like, is outstanding, like a global audience, but it also became the most watched women's pro sporting event in US history.
Mm.
Some other cool little like tidbits, just like a reminder of highlighting things for the year. Dawn Staley became the first Black coach, male or female, to win three NCAA championship titles, coming out of the women's NCAA. Ruth Kepinich broke the previous marathon world record by 2 minutes at Chicago, clocking a 2:09:56, and again was the first woman to ever finish a marathon in less than 2 hours and 10 minutes. Another really cool one that I picked out from like the Olympics and Paralympic information was that China's Zhang Yuan became the most successful athlete at the 2024 Paralympics, winning seven gold medals in only 10 days. She's a swimmer. Really, really cool. And then the other Olympic tidbit was that 66,000 fans packed into the stadium for the women's rugby Olympic competition final matches, which was a new world record. So I thought that that was just like really cool, highlighting how well women's sports did from a viewership, from a fandom perspective, just from like some really cool performances as well over the past year, which I think builds in well to talking about growth in women's sports. And an announcement that came out this past week was that the FIFA Women's World Cup will be streamed on Netflix for 2027 and 2031. They're really going hard in their ability to stream live sporting events, which is cool because it's more accessible to more people. But the biggest thing is that they'll also do a dual telecast in both English and Spanish for the World Cup. It's the first competition to be acquired in full by Netflix and will provide US fans with unparalleled access to every match live, as well as an immersive coverage, including star-studded studios. They're also going to put together a and produce an exclusive documentary series in the lead up for both tournaments, spotlighting the world's top players, their journeys, and the global growth of women's soccer in general, which is just like, yes, like they did this for the men's Tour de France, they did this for men's golf, they've done this for F1 racing, for Formula One. So this coming to women's soccer is really, really exciting in my mind and just like continues to show a reinvestment in women's sporting.
Yeah, that's really,
Amazing.
really rad.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the final bit of news, which stays within the soccer household, the soccer theme of our
Hmm.
sports news section, is that the NWSL announced the newest secured bid for a soccer franchise. And so Denver will be getting the 16th franchise. They submitted the first payment fee this past week, and the total expansion fee is going to be 110 million, which is the largest expansion fee in women's sports ever. Denver will debut in 2026, so not this season, and that they will also debut alongside the new franchise in Boston that was announced in 2023. This addition of these two clubs means that the NWSL will have added 8 teams to their kind of playing field since the 2021 season. And for Denver, notably, and Hillary's like, Denver, Denver,
Yeah.
is that this will be the fifth major professional sports team based in the city. So again,
Mhm.
you've got the MLB, the NFL, the NBA, and the NHL already present in Denver. About time they add a women's sporting team to that group. So they will get their fifth professional sports team with this new soccer franchise.
Just means that we need a sports bra over here, sports bra bar.
Heck
But
yeah.
yeah, I know we've got a lot of things in Denver now. I mean, there's been a lot of shifting, and it feels like it's like the hub for a lot of really like good sporting teams. But it's super cool to see a good women's team added to it.
Yeah, there was a new women's sports bar that just opened somewhere, not in the franchise of the Sports Bra, but it's another
Yeah,
independent one. I can't remember where it is. It's called Title
I don't
Nine,
know. Oh, that's
and
cool.
it's in the Mountain West somewhere, but I don't remember where it is.
Hmm.
We'll figure it out. We'll come back to you with
Yeah.
that information. Keely, you've been doing a lot of reading and researching and studying, and I know that you've got something on your mind. So, can you share with us a little bit about what you which soapbox you want to get on today?
Sure. Yeah. So excitingly, I'm planning a study. So I've been doing a big literature review on pregnancy outcomes and elite sport and exercise and all of these things. And I revisited an article that we talked about like maybe a year ago now, and I was a little bit flabbergasted. So I will admit that when we presented this article, I had read the abstract and then I had read the discussion, or sorry, the conclusion and the discussion. And I did not read through the entire results section. So that is my fault. However, this study by Stellingworth and team, basically the Olympic Committee expert group on pregnancy, was looking at the effect of pregnancy on the 42 elite to world-class runners on training and performance outcomes. Um, so the general like summary that they provide for this article is basically saying that these athletes, decreased running volume into their third trimester. The majority of them took teal day, 6 weeks to return to run, which when you look into that, it's a very large range of 1 to 8 weeks. And 80% of them reached pre-pregnancy training volume by 3 months. And then basically their big takeaway was like after 1 to 3 years postpartum, they all had either similar or increased performance at their respective events. And I think we kind of like, gave some praise to this study because it showed that, you can return to sport postpartum and still compete at your best. The thing that I think this paper does a disservice to are the women athletes in that when you dive into the actual results, again, this is not in the discussion or the conclusion, which is shocking. Over 50% of the women in the study were injured with either a stress fracture, a musculoskeletal injury, or a tendon damage during this postpartum journey. And so I think that
Sounding
it's
familiar?
But exactly, but it's crazy that they forgot to describe that in this like tagliney, like really like rah, summary because it wasn't sexy. And I think that's such a disservice to be like, oh, you can be back to full form like 1 to 3 years after, but you probably will have a big injury that will make this 1 to 3 years really extended, right? Because, like, what if these women all would have taken 12 weeks? Maybe they would have been back to performance in 1 to 2 years. Like, why is it that we're highlighting this crazy range where people are reaching this performance and we neglect to say that, like, actually, though, this timeline of return to run was not that good for these athletes? And so I wanted to call it out because I think we gave this study a lot of praise and I think it just does a disservice to a lot of the athletes who were in the study and athletes looking to get back to form, not realizing that actually like given this study, it's still a 50% or more rate that you're gonna get injured postpartum, and that's not fair. And so yeah, I just kind of wanted to call that out. There's obviously like a need for a lot more studies in this space. Most of the studies in postpartum return to run are kind of anecdotal like this, where they have like these big statements, but they don't actually go into the nuance. And then a lot more of them are not even on elite athletes; they're just kind of on regular people. So yeah, hopefully we can start to do a little more studies in this space and get to a little bit more of a granular understanding of like what is the proper timeline so we can drop that number from 50% to maybe 10%, right? Like there's no reason why 50% of these athletes should be having stress fractures or really big injuries coming out of pregnancy. Like talking to my friend Rachel Drake yesterday, she was like, "Yeah, I think the thing that does another disservice is that the mental toll that takes on you as someone who's coming back, not used to your body, no longer identifying as an athlete, you're like in this weird influx state, right? And then all of a sudden you're injured and you lose that identity again. Like the mental toll that takes on you is extreme." And so I just think, yeah, highlighting that this study was not like all roses and flowers, it's actually like highlighting some other really big issues, I think is important.
Yeah, it's totally important. It reminds me too of like having Rachel on the podcast and her talking about this. Like, we asked her about a post that she had put up on Instagram recently at that time where she had about like this, like where they're told this narrative about bouncing back as like
Mhm.
a postpartum athlete, and she really hated that phrase, and like it made it seem like it was elastic, like you just like snap back into form, you'd be back to where you were type of thing, and it felt like there's a lot of pressure to quote unquote bounce back quickly. And it's interesting because I am sure that the stories that we mostly hear akin to the results section, or not the results section, the conclusion of that article are the stories that go well, right? The people who have a seamless return to running, the people who didn't have any complications, the people who didn't have a stress fracture, which is so common when you're breastfeeding in particular. The individuals, who had a vaginal birth versus a C-section, who had tearing with a vaginal birth, who had, maybe an increased recovery time post C-section, et cetera. We don't hear those stories as often. We don't, well, one, humans don't have to share everything, and I totally get that. I do wish that people coming back who have different stories, those stories would be told more, because I do think it's really hard, like looking ahead at potentially like trying to have a family and like n thinking that there's only one way to come back from pregnancy, and like not really feeling like you have the whole picture. And that
Mhm.
article kind of feels like it's doing the same thing, right? Like it
Right.
doesn't give you the whole picture.
Right, which is
Right.
not what science is supposed to do.
Yeah.
No, and I think exactly what you were talking about, Keely. It's like obviously I've not been pregnant and I don't know what that's like, but I have been injured and I know what it's like to lose your identity with that. But I think instead of this bouncing back mentality, I wish that there'd be some sort of a thing about like, okay, I'm a new person, I'm different now, I've changed, especially even in this period, and then you can like look at it in a different way because I think why it's so common to have a stress fracture and a bone injury is just because we don't know how much you actually need to fuel during that period when you're trying to feed another human. I mean, Rachel Drake talked about it, but that's like you're the same person, but you're like a different athlete in that period when you're recovering from injury or going through something. So it's like this interim period of when you're coming bouncing back. It's like actually I'm a new human. It's like I
Mhm.
feel like you have to really respect it, but it's hard to quantify it and talk about it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. It's like we're trying so hard to be our former self, but maybe we're not our
Yep,
former self ever
we're
after
not.
baby. And like you kind of have to accept
Mhm.
that going in, but that doesn't mean you can't have your best performances still. It just means you're different.
Totally.
Yeah.
That's why it was like a huge thing for me. It's like, believe your best athletic days are ahead. And it's like, it's timeless because, like, even if I'm not the same person and we're not the same people ever, we can still continue to achieve and strive to be the relative best for our current state. And I think that's like a really important thing to focus on instead of just like, oh, let's get back to who I was beforehand because you're
Yeah.
never the same.
Yeah, that
Hmm.
goes beyond pregnancy, right? That goes to just like
Hmm.
the athletic journey and experience and aging. And we see it in our own athletics. We see it in the athletes that we coach, right? Where it's like we're the worst type of comparison, I think, is not me comparing myself to Hillary. It's me comparing myself to me of 5 years ago,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
And sometimes the world tells you exactly like how you've changed, and sometimes you feel it, and it's definitely yeah, I think this
yeah,
is going to bode well into our conversation today because I do think that it takes a realignment and like a refocusing
totally.
on what you value and how you're going to approach your next set of goals.
Just one quick interjection. It's like I
Yes.
remember this when I was coming back from injury. Like I love Strava, I love it. But like sometimes when I was like struggling, it was like, here's a memory from 2 years ago, just to like poke the bear of like, this is where you were at, Hillary, 2 years ago. And I'm like, I'm sitting on the couch, I've got crutches, I can't run. Like, what's going on? And then sometimes, then it's like, then you have a run and you're back and you like get a little crown. You're like, here's your run from 2 years ago. And you're like, yeah, I'm crushing it. But it's hard. It's hard.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah. We're our own worst enemies. And the technology that we insist on using sometimes fuels that and sometimes is a fuel that needs to be taken away, like oxygen from fire.
Mhm.
But yeah, thank you for bringing that to our attention, Keely. It's important to kind of revisit those research pieces that we've talked about in the past, some that have changed, some that have been debunked, some that just maybe we didn't understand in totality. So I
Mhm.
think that's super important. With
Yep.
that being said, today we're going to talk about we want to talk about goals, and you're probably being like beat over the head a little bit on social media, et cetera, with like goal setting and like setting resolutions and all this kind of stuff. And that's not what we want to talk about. We don't want to talk about, establishing a smart goal or planning your race season or the changes you're going to make this year to make you a newer, better you. That's not what we're here for. But goals are out there right now, and it's definitely a hot topic early in a new year, despite spring being a little ways off. I like to think of this as a reset season before things start to bloom a couple months down the road. But what got me thinking about that too was an older tweet from one of my favorite authors, Brad Stulberg. Great writer, really, really thoughtful guy. He's written a number of books that are, I think, super practical and really helpful. And the tweet was about goals as well. And he goes in to say, goals are wonderful as destinations, but too much focus on them can be overwhelming, especially since all the work occurs in small chunks along the way. Do the work, be willing to adjust when necessary, and let the results take care of themselves. Easy to understand, hard to do. And to me, that really summarizes this like the feel of like being process driven. And you've probably heard a lot of athletes say that, that they are more into process than outcomes, which again, maybe easy to understand, very hard to do. Um, but obviously trying to like steer the ship and how and what we focus on. And so I'm wondering for both of you personally, when it comes to thinking about this, when it comes to thinking about, you know, goals in the abstract, let's say, and this notion of being process versus outcome oriented, like how and why do you think about those things?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of what we had just talked about with like the long game. And I think this is something I've learned the hard way. And it's really difficult is that the longer we're athletes and longer we're in sport, like the harder it is to actually improve and see these big improvements and these breakthroughs. And I think that can be really tough, especially when like outwardly, especially in social media, like the shiny bright thing is like what people attach their attention to, and sometimes it can leave you feeling stagnant. And then but really the important work and like a breakthrough of an athlete like later in their career, it's from doing exactly what Brad outlines, and that's like just dedication to the daily grind. And like sometimes it's actually realistic and normal for you to kind of have a plateau for a period of time and then be able to kind of like reach your goals. But to me, it's always a reminder of just dedication to the process. And I've really learned this through my injury recoveries when I had no idea if I would return to sport and how I would actually do that. But I was doing it anyways because it was something that was really important to me, not only in my immediate health and future from a daily basis, but just longevity and just overall health and balance for years for the rest of my life, right? And so um, I put this post down about because I'm not someone who's big on New Year's resolutions. I love goals. I love having goals, but to me, it's the day like being in love with the daily grind. I literally am. I love a routine. I love working hard every day, and even working hard if that means taking a rest day or listening to my body and taking a step back. Like I think that's what it means. And maybe that's not as flashy or Instagrammable, but you know what? That's okay.
Yeah, I know for me, the big goals stress me out. So I need the little bite-sized things that I can focus on day in and day out. And I don't think about the big anxiety provoking thing. I'm very protective in that way.
Mm.
Keely, what about
Yeah.
you when it comes to process versus outcome?
Yeah, I think like Hillary, I've had my fair share of like basically understanding that I can't do the long-term goals really either. But I think we fall in this trap because long-term goals are super sexy and they're like supported by sponsors, they're supported by the community, they're supported by everyone and they're encouraged. But I think when you peel back the layers, when you look at someone who's in this sport, most of the time we have this like innate serious drive to begin with, that adding this external pressure, this like North Star really like drives into overdrive, and all of a sudden like your innate drive is working against you because you have this like crazy audacious goal that everyone is holding you accountable for to now. um and so yeah, I think I've had this big goal like back when I was in my Western States journey in the beginning, like after finishing it the first time, I was like, okay, now I really want to win it. And I think putting that out there is really brave, but I also think for me, it's counterproductive because I almost get too like narrow-minded on the goal and I forget to check in with myself on the journey. So then it's like, cool, like JT puts this into an analogy where like you're basically burrowing into the ground, right? And that's your training journey. But on a normal training journey, you kind of have to come up for air, reassess where you are, make sure you're not burrowing blindly towards like your not goal, right? And like make sure you're on track. And I think when I have these big goals, I kind of just burrow blindly and think like, no, this is what I have to do, this is what I have to do, and not like enjoy the process and not reevaluate the process. And so my goal with med school was to really enjoy the process because it can also become really daunting to be like, oh my gosh, I have to remember this year and a half of information for this big step exam that I have to pass in order to become a doctor. Or you can be like, I need to put in my 10 hours today. I need to put in my 8 hours tomorrow. I need to put in this day. And it's same with training. It's like you can bat singles, you can keep getting out there and like you can have this big goal, but that's not what your driving force is. Your driving force is just maintaining the consistency that you need to put in along the way in order to achieve that goal. And yeah, like to Hillary's point, if you're not putting in the little work along the way, the big goal is never going to happen anyways. And so like my current kind of mindset's just been like living in the present and like doing what I need to do every single day and like hoping the rest will come.
I love this idea as like so as like a professional athlete or as like anyone in the sport, right? You're right. We all like the big shiny thing off on the far end. Can you imagine going to a sponsor and being like, "Hey, so I'm gonna bat a lot of singles. Like, hope that's cool. Like, I promise I'm gonna
I
get a
love
home run
it.
eventually, but I'm gonna bat a lot of singles.
Yeah.
Like, we good with that? You guys in? You buying in? Can I have a retainer? Thank you."
I need
Um,
I need a
that's so
tennis
funny.
analogy. I need a tennis one.
I love
Hit a
it.
lot
No,
of
but
hit a lot of winners. I don't know.
no, but it's like, yeah. So
It's just get
Oh
out
no,
there.
unforced errors. That's the thing in tennis. It's like the person who wins is the person who has the least unforced errors. So it's just staying consistent and just
yeah,
placing your
exactly.
shots. I just
Yeah.
don't like I do like baseball, but it's not my fave.
Yeah. We'll continue to work on our sports analogies. Okay, so one thing I
Yeah.
wanted to talk about. And when I think about North Star, I think more about like our values, like our underlying value system, and kind of how that parallels our why, like what our why is, and like why are we in this sport? Why are we doing this thing? Why do we show up every day? And so all too often I find athletes sign up for a bunch of races while skipping this kind of step, this in goal setting, like understanding why they're doing what they're doing, understanding what their underlying values are and how they all tie together. And how I see this play out too, which I'm sure we've all experienced. Have you guys ever signed up for a race because you thought you should be there because everyone around you was hyped on that race, and then you're like, you get to the race and you're like, why am I here? Or you're doing the training and you hate the training, and you're like, why am I doing this? Like that's a common experience, I have to imagine.
I I think I've had it, well, yeah, even this year, for instance. Like I need a break from doing UTMB and I'm not doing it this year. And so it's like, then it's like the lottery opens up to like sign up and all this stuff. And I'm just like, nope. And there's like, I get the emails and there's a little bit of a like, oh my gosh, I should be doing this. But like, I know that I need a break from it. So I'm not going. But there is that expectation because it's like, on, I mean, I don't know, like, contracts or whatever, but that's like a pretty big incentive race. And like, that's the thing is like, okay, you should be training to do this one. Like, this is the UTMB finals, like, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, I think I've done that in the past of going to other races because maybe I should been there or I rushed into it. I think that's kind of was what happened last year or yep, last year. I'm confused about which year we're in now, but yeah, last year 2024 for UTMB, I felt like it was kind of rushed to get there and maybe it would have been better if I took like a year. So yeah, I'm doing that. Doesn't make it, it's like it's difficult, but there's definitely a lot of pressure and expectation to kind of be at certain start lines, even if that's your style of race, right?
Well, it's like Keely, you're one of the, not the few, but you're one of the select group of people who have turned down a golden ticket before, right? And like there's this expectation that like, why are you running a golden ticket race if you're not going to take a golden ticket to Western states? Well, like it has to be part of your like, it has to align with your why at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And I'm glad that some people have followed suit on that journey because 100 miles is no joke, right? And if you're not 100% bought in, there's going to be something that happens during it that's going to make you want to stop. And if you're not 100% in, you will stop because it's pretty miserable to run 100 miles. Like even when it goes really well, there's times that hurt so badly. But I think we can race in races that excite us. Like Lake Sonoma always excites me. Like faster, shorter races are so fun, but that doesn't mean that I have to do it because I want to get a ticket. It might just be I want to race against all of the best people in the sport because they're all throwing down at that race too. But I think one thing I did this last year in 2023 was coming off of states where I dislocated my shoulder. I was having a serious, like, kind of identity crisis because I'd been there before with that same shoulder injury and kind of lost my entire sport. Um, and so what I decided to do instead of maybe just take time off was to like pivot into a totally different sport, which was Thailand. And, I'm not a hiker. I feel like I try to get into these kind of like very mountainous, rugged hiking races and they're not really my jam, but I try sometimes because I think like, "Ooh, I could be good at everything or I should want to be good at everything." But I don't really enjoy it to your point. And then, when the going gets tough, you're like, why am I doing this? Like, this is not running. And like, I've always thrived at races that are much more of a foot race than like a hiking race. And I think that's okay to just like lean into that a little bit and not put yourself in a box, but not force yourself to do maybe an extreme version of a hiking race that is just like so outside your comfort zone that you might not even enjoy it. And so I hesitate saying that because I don't like people putting themselves in boxes, but it's also like we get to do this sport, right? Like it's not something we're forced to do. And so, making sure you're enjoying the race you're choosing is pretty important, even if it means you're kind of like staying in a similar vein of racing.
Yeah, and we'll bring this back around here in a little bit, but that's like maybe maybe you value competition, right? So going to a race where you cannot be competitive doesn't make as much sense versus someone who really highly values um change, right? Or growth in a specific way, new challenges type of thing. They might value going to do a race that is way outside of their skill set, is way outside of their comfort zone because it aligns with their values. So that's kind of what I want to dig into here a little bit because I do think it's a really helpful thought exercise for athletes as they do look ahead at 2025, at 2026, et cetera, and they try to start to plan where are they going and why are they going there. And so to set this up a little bit, I want to just like put some context around like why, like your why and defining your why versus defining your values. And so I found this like analogy very helpful. So to start, it says your why is your core purpose, the fundamental reason behind your actions and existence. This could also be called your passion. While your values, on the other hand, are principles and beliefs that guide your behavior and decision making. You can think of your why as the what and your values as the how. Okay. And then put that into another, like more simple analogy. Imagine you're building a house. Your why is the purpose for building the house, i.e., you're providing shelter, create a family home, and your values are the principles you adhere to during the construction process, i.e., using sustainable materials, employing fair labor, etc. So again, it's kind of like setting up your why kind of does allow you when like the going gets hard in a race to understand why you're there. And then your values can help steer the ship, can help you make choices to honor your why, ostensibly. And I'm wondering if you guys have thought about this, put this into your own practice at all, even loosely, even if you didn't realize this was a why and value setup, or have you worked on establishing these kind of baselines with your athletes? Even without knowing it, because I do think we do a lot of these things without necessarily thinking of them in like a clear-cut way.
Yeah, I mean, I do this with a lot of my athletes, and I think I try to do it on my own too, but I think talking to it in the lens of an athlete coach relationship is a lot easier for me. Um, Oftentimes, an athlete and I will start talking about what they want to do in the next year or in the next training season. And oftentimes, the athlete at that point has a really good idea of what gets them excited. They have a good idea of what they want to do, what their goal is for the year, what they want to work on. And oftentimes, that conversation initially results in really concrete goals of like, I want to get faster. I want to get my Western States qualifier. I want to do X, Y, or Z. I think after that conversation, a lot of doubt starts to set in and like almost FOMO, where they're like, wait, but I also want to do this thing and I want to do this thing and I want to do this thing. And so a lot of athletes will then, within that month after that initial talk, where we're trying to plan our goals and our values for that next year, will come back to me with something just completely out of left field. Like, I really wanted to get faster at the 10K, but can I do this 65-mile run?
With
And
45,000 feet of climbing?
and I will try to be really just like frank because I think sometimes, at least knowing some of my athletes, that results in a very good response by them. But I'll just basically be like, well, how does that fit into your goal? Like what is what is your purpose for doing this new thing and how does it fit into our initial goal? And then oftentimes some of these athletes who do throw these big ones out of left field are battling something else. So then I'll be like, how does this impact this injury we just got over? How does it impact X, Y, or Z? And so, yeah, I think you have to have that initial talk. That doesn't mean the next planning session is going to be perfect. I think, again, a lot of athletes will have these goals, but then they'll also want to do these other things. And so I think just trying to bring it back to like, you want the best for your athlete. That means like you got to follow these goals that are going to be beneficial to them. They're going to set them up for success because you don't want your athletes chasing these goals they're not going to be ready for. And that's kind of how I at least try to keep my athletes on track towards their goals is to try to just keep reminding them of them and like why maybe some decision is not in alignment with their goals.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is something, I mean, I completely agree with that. This is something I talked about. I've been doing a little Substack because I just love writing. And a lot of the topics I've written about have been kind of influenced by what I've read from Brad Stulberg or Steve Magnus. I love those guys. I listen to their podcast too. And basically, this whole idea of this perpetual state of a growth mindset. I wrote recently about this of like how we need to be constantly improving, doing all of these things to make us better. And I think that's PRing constantly. And it's kind of less of even trying new things, even if you fail, right? But really, at what point does a growth mindset, at what point is it no longer serving you? And I think we all are this way. I mean, like we're very driven people. And so, we naturally have goals and things that are pushing ourselves, but it's like having either those people or community in our corners that can like hold us back, right? Like coaches, if I can put my coaching hat on and like coach myself, wish I could do that more easily, but that's why I have a coach to tell me to back off and to do these things or like that I'm doing enough, or like I'll just like quickly text Corinne and be like, yo, Corinne. And she's like, Hill, chill. But that kind of thing, I think it can be, we're especially in our community, we're of like people love to run, get out there and do these cool goals. And like we're constantly in this state where not only do we have our own goals, and we're constantly bombarded with all these other cool things that people are doing all the time. And it's like this expectation of, well, what's actually normal? What's actually normal for me to achieve my goals? What do I need to be doing? What noise do I need to like not pay attention to and not listen to? Um, I mean, and again, I mentioned Strava earlier. Like sometimes there's points where I just like silence everything and I just don't check it. It's just between me and my coach, or even on social media, right? Like I can like schedule things on there, so I don't even have to be on the app to kind of be bombarded with these things. So that's how I kind of implement it in my own running, but then also trying to be that source of stability and knowledge and wisdom for those athletes that I coach. Um, but I'll read kind of um, like a quote by Brad Stulberg in his book Master of Change. That's kind of his most recent one that's been
It's
out.
super good.
It's really good. It took me a while to get into it, and I was like, I don't know, but then it's awesome. It's like so many good takeaways. So he says, success in almost anything is not about finding the magic secret, the ultimate hack, or the latest bright and shiny object. It's about a steadfast commitment to consistently nailing the stuff that everyone knows but finds too basic or boring to do. And yeah, I think that that's just it is. It's like I think about this like even when I'm doing like my gym work in the gym. It's like nothing sexy, nothing crazy or fancy, but it's gonna help me stay injury free. And yeah, I think that's just kind of what we have to hold on to, and like that's kind of the daily practice of being committed to the boring stuff, which I secretly love.
Yeah, I think you have to secretly love it. And kind of I was thinking, Hillary, too, about like your most recent Substack about kind of about connection and
Mm,
community. And so when
yeah.
we think about like values, like what values help to guide your running, because right, that's a hard thing for people to like pin down. Like, what are my values at the end of the day? Like, is it competition? Is it community? Is it integrity? Is it self-improvement? Is it perseverance, loyalty, creativity, etc.? Like those will drive and steer how you choose to experience everything around you, including running and including racing. Like for me, I probably fall into like the self-improvement and the community um more than anything, maybe, right? And so I like to choose races that I like to train for things that I don't feel like I'm inherently good at. I keep trying to do fast, flat racing, even though I'm really good at hiking, for example. Keely and I just need to trade places and we'll be fine if we can just stick to our lanes. But I'm gonna keep I love showing up and getting my butt kicked, right? Like I love competition, even if I'm not gonna be the top of the podium type of thing. Like I thrive finishing seventh. Again, hitting a lot of singles team. Sorry about that. But Hillary, in your most recent Substack, you talk about
Mm,
community being a driving value and how that has influenced your training and thinking about training and racing, et cetera. And it's been very positive, it seems. So I
mhm.
just like, can you speak a little bit to how that has been part of this value system that you're like, that you're now, I feel like really like nailing your goals to?
Yeah, and it's so funny you put in the notes like your recent Substack. I was like, I don't know, Corinne, I just published one yesterday. I'm not sure which one you're
It
referring
was
to,
that
but
recent. Yeah.
but yeah, so the one I just like this is something I've been thinking about a lot this year, and kind of it's fitting that it's the one that I wanted to kind of kick off 2025 with. It's about to not do more, but to trust more. And it's like I think my default is to put more things on my to-do list to feel like very productive. But really, it's about eliminating those things and leaning into connection and relationships that are actually real and tangible. And this year was a big learning experience, and just I've implemented a lot more of this like things that are not for career or a job or to-do list, but like just trying to connect with people, and for no other reason, just to build relationships and community. And the more I focused on that, the more fulfilled I felt. And yeah, I just think it's something for me that I've realized it's very important for me to feel happy and grounded and to not keep chasing doing more, but to do less, but in a more quality type of way. Um, and I mean, I love community, and so even with me, it's like when I feel the best, it's not that I'm interacting with hundreds of people all the time. It's just like my core group of friends. And it can be even a friend helping me with, a run workout. I've got Jeremy Scallon, who he's always super psyched to join me for all these little run workouts, but it's just fun. We can make it fun, and it's not about like, nailing the paces or whatever. It's just showing up that day. We're both trying hard, meeting our goals, and just having that connection and just um yeah, with family members or just people. It's just really leaning into community. In fact, like this year, I've tried to launch something like these hilly goat camps to try to bring people together because I think it's great to do that at a race. I feel like we can get that a lot, but it's around a competition and performance. I want to take that away, and I want to just like bring people together just to kind of share like in experiences. Sure, we all like running, but what else can we learn about each other? What else do we have in common? And I think the more that we focus on that, the more fun I know I have in doing hard things. And I think it's actually an essential need for humans. And I think Brad and Steve Magnus talk about this a lot.
Yeah, the community is so important. Keely, as you reflect on this, do you see where like a value or a couple values might kind of be the underpinning for your training and racing?
Yeah, totally. I think kind of to Hillary's point, community has been something that I've realized lately is really important to me. I think this sport is inherently like solo. And so I think if you can build a community around your training or around your racing, like that's really helpful because it gets kind of lonely just training by yourself. And I think one thing I did for States 2023 was train a lot solo, kind of live solo even. And that does not work well for me. I definitely would much rather be in a community, maybe not be in the best training grounds, but have friends and feel like you're working towards a common goal rather than just grinding day in, day out by yourself for one goal. And then, yeah, I think for me, like, I really like competition. So I definitely gravitate towards really competitive races because I like to race with people who are also better than me, because I think that's where you'll get the best out of yourself and also push yourself to your limits. And then, yeah, I think my latest one is definitely more around like just consistency and just enjoying the training because training is really fun. And so I think when that's not fun, that's a cause for concern. And so that's kind of just been my driving force is like, is it fun? Do I want to do it? And the answer has been like overwhelmingly yes, which is awesome. And so keeping that as kind of my driving force of like, how am I feeling today? Cool. I'm gonna go for a run. Oh, I feel like this is kicking my butt. I'm not gonna go for a run. So just like trying to keep that like really, really easy goal maintained throughout the journey.
Yeah. And things like, freedom and health are great values to have kind of as at the
Yeah.
underpinning as
Yep.
well. And these can change too. It doesn't mean that, every season, every chapter, you have the same values kind of allowing you to put the house together well. But it is, I think, important, as you mentioned earlier, Keely, like you're burrowing, you're burrowing, you're burrowing. You got to come up for air to make sure you're not digging a hole in the wrong direction.
Mhm.
And so I do think that that's where like that misalignment
Yeah.
of goals and values can really happen. I brought up earlier, like maybe you value competition, but you only sign up for really small local events, or you
Mhm.
value self-improvement, but you keep picking, and you don't pick races that actually like steer you towards
Mhm.
self-improvement, that keep you in your safe box or whatever it is. And I'm wondering, have you guys ever felt that really palpable, like of just like feeling like you're or recognizing that you're digging the hole in the wrong direction, that there is a misalignment between your goals and your values?
Yeah, this past year, it's like I
Hillary's like
basically
getting to UTMB was hard.
exactly, and I kept pushing it and pushing it and pushing it, and I did have a lot of fun to like I kind of know that I need something, but I'm not exactly sure. And then kind of the more data I gather, then I'm like, okay, yeah, like this is actually what I need. And so then that's like where I'm at now is like, okay, well, maybe I should like it would have been more productive to be gone for like a month last summer instead of like the whole summer. But like I also love adventure and connection with community through races. But if I'm only doing that through competition, that kind of misses the mark for me. And so it's just coming up with a new balance from kind of pushing it too far this last year.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Keely, what about you?
Yeah, I think there was a big disconnect post States 2023 for me, and then my kind of like journey thereafter because I went into Thailand kind of doing it for the wrong reasons. Again, not really aligning with my goals as an athlete, not really aligning with my goals from a health perspective. And that kind of set me back for this entire year where I've been battling kind of health issues the whole year. And so I think, yeah, like we can get so bogged down by trying to fulfill these goals that we are convincing ourselves serve us at the detriment of a lot of other things. And so I think just trying to be more present to like, again, like look up, come up for air to make sure you're not just like veering completely off course in the middle of these training blocks is just really important for me because yeah, I think I just kept digging myself deeper and deeper into a hole for no real reason that was productive. And then I've been digging myself out for the last year, and that really takes the wind out of your sails because you're not racing well, but you're also not enjoying it. So then the question is just like, what am I doing? Like, this is
Like,
miserable. I'm not
why?
racing well. I don't enjoy it. I don't enjoy the training. I feel like crap. Like, what are you doing? And so, yeah, I think just trying to stay true to your values there so that you're not finding yourself in that hole because it's not a fun hole to crawl out of and it takes a really long time.
Yeah, I find that when I get the sensation of chasing is how I would describe it, where it's like I don't really know where I'm supposed to be going, but I'm chasing the what I think I'm supposed to be doing, I guess, is where that misalignment comes for me, where it's like I it's not about needing to do something or wanting to do something or liking something. It's about like internal or external or sponsor or community expectations for like where I should be, quote unquote, like I'm using air quotes here, where I should be. And I
Hmm.
find myself chasing the thing as opposed to like really being engaged in what I'm doing.
Hmm.
And which is just kind of like, I don't know, it's hard when the going gets hard,
Hmm.
man, there is no underpinning value. There is no underpinning goal. You're like,
Yeah.
how did I get here? Like,
Yeah.
why am I here doing this thing? Like, this is not, I mean, I was excited to be at Javelina, for example. I wasn't there for a golden ticket. I was there to like challenge myself because again, challenging myself tends to be a value and a goal set for me. But I had spent all summer working on this Wonderland project that didn't come together due to like getting sick and then having bad weather. And so I felt a need to have something to conclude my season. I felt this obligation to have a something at the end of my year to
Hmm.
like bookend this situation because I really
Yeah.
didn't race this year because I raced
Hmm.
Transvolcania and then I worked a crap ton and then I was like, I'm doing the Wonderland. Like, that's my thing. That's what I'm
Hmm.
doing this year. And it didn't come together. And so it's like, I felt like I had to have something to show for it effectively. So I
Hmm.
was going to do Kodiak. And then the fire was in Kodiak, which like the uncertainty there was like, cool, I don't have enough, like, there's not enough of a goal or a value system aligned with Kodiak for me to do it. So I'm pulling the plug. Cool, I'm gonna go to Javelina because the community there. And like I love community. So that's a reason to be on that start line. And it feels like grasping for straws a little bit and chasing a thing, a notion of a goal versus like maybe an actual goal. And
Hmm.
I can sense that in myself, but I can see that with athletes too. When you like ask for your athletes like potential calendar after that initial goal talk and it like they come back with like 16 potential races, none of which align with their like the goal that you thought you were both working towards together. And you're
Hmm.
like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You
Yep.
say you want this thing. And maybe you don't actually want this other thing, or maybe it's not as important as I thought it was to you.
Mm.
Because you can just want to experience something. That is a worthy goal. But if it is a performance level goal, you really want to do your best potential thing here. And none of the things that we're trying to put on the calendar align with that, like work towards getting towards that thing.
Hmm.
Like that's a misalignment that we have to like come back together on
Hmm.
to not be chasing our tail. Because I do think that that's like the spiral sensation is you're like, what am I running after? Because I don't
Hmm.
know what it is anymore.
Yeah, because I almost did Javelina as well. And I was doing it for a similar reason where my season hadn't really planned out. My sponsors wanted me to do a golden ticket race. And I had to have some like tough chats with JT, who kind of just tells me how it is because he just knows my propensity to overdo it. And he's like, you tell me your goal is to feel better and to have like healthy training and to feel healthy. Yet like you've only been running for 2 months feeling good. And yet now you're going to go try to race this 100 mile the day after your finals. And you're not in any better spot than you were like, a couple months ago. So why are we doing that? And it was not the advice I wanted to hear at first, right? Because you're like, no, I'm doing it for better reasons. And then you sit with yourself for a little bit and you're like, nope, these are all valid. And you have to swallow your pride a little bit and be like, I'm not doing it. My sponsors want me to. I probably am doing a little bit of a detriment to myself from a sponsor lens. But at the same time, like, I'd rather not do it than be out there hating myself, racing really poorly, and also digging myself into a bigger health deficit. So, yeah, it was like, but it's hard. It's hard to have those really frank conversations and also like look at in the mirror and critically be like, okay, yeah, I actually shouldn't do this race.
Yeah, praise JT. That's a
I
good
know.
that he's a good one.
Good, good egg.
He makes cute reels
Yeah.
too.
He's so good at reels. It's not fair.
The little deer bowing. Sorry, if you guys haven't seen it yet, there's an end of year reel that Keely's in that JT made, and he does this. They're like bowing with deers in Japan. It's the best thing
It's
ever.
so
Just go
fun.
rewatch the first 5 seconds of it over and
Every
over
time he
again.
launches a reel, which is like once a year, I'm always like, why don't you make my reels? But then I realize like it takes him a long time because he puts so much effort into them, but they're so
They're
good.
really cute. I love it.
That's
Sorry,
funny.
we digress. Hillary, what were you gonna say?
Oh, no, no. That's important. That's important stuff. I think it's good. Like it's so good to have again, it's like your team. It can be one person, your coach or significant other, like that's all it takes. Someone that knows you well to kind of help you get out of your own way. Because we're not always able to have that wisdom to do it for ourselves. And I was kind of in a similar situation for after UTMB. Didn't go well. I put everything into it finally was like getting some running momentum after silly recovery from ankle surgery and I was like lost and then there was I was really forcing it with training and then thinking of like traveling super far again to race and to force it and then I had a lot of family stuff going on. I was just super stressed. I wasn't enjoying things and I was still trying to keep pushing it and so um it was like having an honest conversation with my coach and also um my old coach Adam St. Pierre about he's like Hillary just like keep it fun like you're just trying to fit too many things and like really forcing it. It's like if you and this is something that I've read about with Steve Magnus like if you're trying to run faster you don't tense up it's like this I think it's like the 85% rule. It's like if you're trying to get that much faster you don't tense up, you actually have to
Mm,
relax into it and then it just kind of happens.
mm,
And so that's kind of the mentality that I was trying to it was hard to like say no to certain things and to even to feel like I needed to kind of have something else um one more result later in the season instead of just like taking a step back and really listening to what I needed and like kind of relax into it and like let it happen. And so and then that leads to where I am now where I'm actually feeling really good in running and happy and excited and not tied to going to Tarawera to like for a result but just really for the experience and for myself and that I feel like I'm in a better spot mentally more than anything.
Yeah. There's kind of one final notion, and it's a little bit tangential, but it's also very much aligned with this. It's adjacent. And it's how I think it most often presents itself with athletes and with myself. And it's this idea of there being a misalignment between the things that you like and the things that you want. And I see it frequently too. And like you tell me, Keely, you tell me that you want to do Doyen in Thailand, but you don't want to go hike for training. Like that is a misalignment between the things that you like, running fast, and the thing that you want, this weird walk around in a jungle in Thailand. So it's like that's how I see this. Like if you can't get on board with this, like these are my like my whys and my values, I think you can think about it as my wants and my likes, or like the thing that I want to do, the experience I want to have versus what I like to do day to day, right? Because if you don't like the grind, as we know, Hillary loves the grind. I think we all love the grind. We all love the daily practice of moving our bodies, etc. But if you don't like the grind associated with getting to this thing that you want, it's going to be really hard to do. Like integrity and loyalty can be your biggest values ever. But if that's not going to get you out the door day in and day out, it's really hard to actually meet that end goal. And this is how I see it, I think, expressed by athletes is that misalignment between their want, their goal,
Mhm.
and the things they like, which I guess could be their values ostensibly. So maybe it's all related, but that's how I like to think about it when I have these like year end or new year talks with myself and with the people that I'm coaching.
Yeah, and it doesn't take that much shifting around, right? It's like to really try to understand what your values are and try to align some things a little bit more. It's like I think about just like little just yeah, little columns and trying to kind of put a little bit more into one. And even just a tiny shift can actually have big improvements in how you're feeling on a daily basis. I think it just takes a lot of introspection and analyzing a little bit at first to kind of understand why you might be feeling this misalignment.
Yeah. There's like little hacks for it too. Like there's goal mapping and really putting pen to paper, I think can be super helpful. I don't know, make a vision board, whatever it is, but I do think actually spending concerted effort on it is important. There are lots of like planners, like not so much like a daily planner of like a schedule, but there are like journaling type planners that are set up for this kind of thing to like help prompt you through steps of like deciphering how you're feeling and what you need because apparently as humans it's hard without prompts sometimes. Keely, any kind of last thoughts on this dichotomy of wants and likes?
Mm.
Pause
Yeah,
for dramatic effect.
yeah. I mean, I think just kind of circling back to the athlete coach conversation, I think trying to suss out their wants from their needs, and I know this is a little bit of a different slant, is really important because I think a lot of athletes want to do something and then they think they need to do something, kind of what we were saying,
Mhm.
whether that's a race or like even a need to move in an unhealthy way, right? So I think trying to suss that out to be like, are we doing this race because we really want to push ourselves, or are we doing this training because we can't sit still? We can't sit with our thoughts because you know what I mean? We can't like not move in a
Yeah.
day. And so I think just trying to suss that out, and then maybe those athletes that do have that tendency to not be okay sitting with their thoughts, to needing to race and move all of the time, trying to find goals that are more tangible and require maybe less training so that you can try to have that balance is the way I kind of go with that because if you're doing it for those kind of wrong reasons, that's just going to end in catastrophe eventually. And I don't want
That's
that
where
journey
burnout
for any of
happens.
my athletes. Yeah, exactly. And if you
Yeah.
can't take a day off, that's a bigger issue than, training for a 50 mile, in my opinion.
Yeah, totally. Integrity be damned. You gotta take a rest day. Yeah, and I do think that there's probably like when I think beyond that chasing sensation, when you do have a real misalignment in your goals and your values and your whys and your likes, wants, and needs, I think that that's kind of where burnout lives and thrives, right? It's kind of like mold or bacteria. It likes a specific climate. I think that burnout is just like that, and it like is looking for a specific climate to grow in, and it is misalignment for sure.
I love that analogy.
Yeah. Talking about
I
mold
found
and
I
bacteria.
found some mold in my English muffins this morning, so I had to throw
Oh
them out.
no, the worst.
No.
I know, so it's like you have
Put
to open
those in the
them. I mean,
freezer.
we're in a exactly we're in a dry climate here, but I guess I just need to open them and put them in the freezer,
Yeah,
like
I don't
my
trust bread.
waffles.
I don't trust bread on the counter.
Yeah,
Fridge or
yeah,
freezer
Okay,
always.
okay, okay. We digress, but I hope that was helpful for all of you listening at home.
yeah.
It's
Because the
like
mold analogy basically just throw that stuff out. We do not let it fester. Do no more.
out for 2025, moldy bread and moldy goals. Um, but I guess like if you guys have thoughts or questions kind of about goals and values and how to navigate this, or if you have a trick because you've cracked the mystery of how to avoid mold at all cost, be it bread or goals, slide into our DMs and let us know because this is a topic that we're fascinated by and a topic that we're thinking about a lot, given that it's early in 2025. So hit us up. Before we go, though, we have to society slam. We've got a couple little slams to ring in the new year. Who wants to start? I nominate Hillary.
Okay, here we go. This one was about the last episode. They said, great episode. I was listening on my New Year's run this morning. Eye-opening as always. And who doesn't love some data-backed insights? Well, we definitely love it.
You came to
So
the right
glad,
place.
yes, we're glad you do too. I started thinking about the whole female athlete and influence as a male runner. How far does that extend? I mean, I take all your recommendations on food and fuel, but maybe not running shoes. A big brand sponsor of athletes and events where I look for a bigger male athlete so I can trust. So it got me thinking, and that's greatly appreciated. So basically, I think he's thinking about where could he look about for a bigger male athlete that he can trust.
Yeah, or I think this to me sounds like he generally turns to maybe Hayden Hawks or another or a big male athlete when it comes to like what
Mm-hmm.
events are they doing, what shoes are they wearing,
Right.
versus like
Yeah.
he's like these ladies know their shit when it comes to eating
Fuel.
enough and fuel and all that kind of stuff. And so I think that's interesting. Like maybe that's also stretching him a little bit to be like, oh, like
Right.
maybe there are events that I haven't thought of because I generally turn to this type of athlete to think
Mm-hmm.
about it in that way. And so I'd
And I
encourage him to think broadly.
Yeah, he
right. And I think
also,
also too, oh, sorry.
go ahead.
No, I was just thinking it was like in reference to when Lila was talking about how women in as influencers, like they're trusted more across other athletes, like when asked to the consumer who they trust more. So I think that's actually universal, like not only just female people who follow female athletes, but also male people who follow female athletes as well. So
Mhm. Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think that also the male-led podcasts don't typically talk a ton about fueling and carbohydrate ingestion and all of these things. And so I think there's also just like a lack in that space, just like there's a lack in, LEA research on male athletes. So
Mm,
mm-mm.
it's all tied
Yes.
together. Um, I'll take this next one because it's short and sweet, just like me. Um, Hey, here, a humble listener. I do love your work. Thank you. For female sport, and I'd also and just also for the world though, like the world in general. We need more of things like this. So more things like what we're doing. So thank you. Kudos to us.
All right. I think this next one's going to be easy for us to tackle, especially me, but also you guys run relatively early at random times too. So, question for an episode. Why do I have such a difficult time waking up my body in the morning? I've noticed I have a hard time eating right away too, and this gets tricky when I need to wake up early for a run or workout. I feel almost sick or something. It goes away, but is annoying. Tempo and speed work is strangely easier for me than the long, slow runs. I think it's because it wakes up my body a lot quicker. I'm getting to the point where I need to run early if I'm going to get the mileage I need, but it can't be so hard. I feel groggy for at least 2 hours post waking up.
And then they write help.
Um, I'll take a stab at this initially, and then I would love to hear your guys' thoughts. But alarm bells are kind of going off in my brain a little bit. Feeling groggy for 2 hours post waking up, I would say is not normal. Might be common, but I don't think is normal. And so I think maybe taking a holistic view at your training and your sleep and your recovery and your post-run fueling and your throughout the day fueling to see if you're getting yourself in a hole. Because when I was really, really energy deficient, I woke up feeling like crap every single day. And so I think first thing in my brain, alarms are going off a little bit. So just maybe taking a little bit of time to holistically just take a view at what you're doing. I'm sure you're crushing it, but sometimes we can get into a hole and we don't realize it because we are balancing so many things. And then I think like, if energy is not a thing and maybe you're just not a morning person, I think that just getting up a little bit earlier and going to bed earlier, giving yourself time to wake up, and then having something that just makes you so excited to get up. Like I love coffee so much that sometimes I go to bed and I'm like, I want to go to sleep so I can have my coffee. And I will go to sleep because I want to have my coffee. So if you can find something that just brings your soul alive that much to get excited for in the morning, that will also help because early mornings aren't fun. And then also like again, the eating thing, if it's not great, just try to wake up slightly earlier and then just play around with different foods. Like for me, I have to go the most basic Quaker Oats oatmeal. It's not fancy, it's not organic. Early in the morning, it sits super well and it's really easy, but it's like pretty bland. but it works for me. So I think just play around with stuff too, and don't like take no for an answer. Like there will be something that works.
Yeah. I was gonna say I like that, the kind of holistic look on it. I think that, yeah, maybe you're deficient in protein, maybe you're not fueling well post exercise. And even if you're thinking, wow, that's like so long before the next day, it's 24 hours before I feel bad again. It's like, well, it kind of all still comes together. So I think that holistic look's really important. And then, yeah, experimenting with easy things to eat in the morning. I've been on I want to say they're called Vans waffles. They're like next to
Oh
Eggo,
yeah.
but they're like
Oh
the
yeah.
organic variety type of thing. They're like they're not high enough calorie, I think, to like be like this is my like go-to breakfast. But when I have to get up really early and I need something in my system really quickly, I'll toast one or two of them. Um, I'll put some jam and some like cottage cheese on it or something. So I get like a little, I like boost the calorie, I boost the carb, I boost the protein of it a little bit. And even if it's only, maybe 250, 300 calories or something to get me out the door, that's enough. And that's really important. But it's not
Yep.
something that's super hard for me to digest and get my system going. And that's been a way too that I've been adding a little bit of protein to it. Otherwise, I don't really get protein in until after my morning run. So that's been something that I've been experimenting with, and it's been helping on those kind of quick turnarounds in the morning. But I'm also like it's hard for me to run right out the door.
The only thing I would add to all of this, is kind of the sleep routine. Like this is something that's really helped me. I have a hard time turning off my brain, and so I've like routines. I just sound like this like boring person who just does the same thing every day, but still, I enjoy it. But before bed, I always have tea. I read and I like light a candle. It's like getting into like the senses. I actually even brought when I was gone for the summer for 3 months, I brought a candle with me so I could still like have that routine, and it just helps wind me down so that you can actually rest and sleep. And then that makes getting up the next day a lot easier. At least I've found. So I always try to look back at the going to bed routine as well as like the feeling like you all said. But that might be able to help as well to make sure you're getting restful sleep.
Yeah. I hope this gets better for you. And if you've got more specifics that we glanced over, always don't hesitate to shoot us, slide into our DMs. Happy to kind of noodle this one with you a bit more, but I think we're sending you down hopefully the right path. And so with that, we're going to sign off for episode 91. We hope you're enjoying your long run or whatever you're doing right now, driving in the car, commuting, doing laundry. I clean and listen to podcasts all the time. But I guess until next time, we'll catch you out on the trails.